Welcome everyone. This is Ken. I'm here with the 9 Principles of Spiritual Recovery channel on YouTube. It's June 27th, so we're in the height of Taurus season. And if you take a look back here, this whole area right now would be full of humans. This is along the coast up here in northern New England. You can probably figure out what that means. And we'll be able to go back down there probably after Labor Day and wear our white, that whole thing. Anyways, so been doing some slideshow work, doing narration. Haven't really been putting the recorded narration to it, the video recorded narration anyway. And been trying to put some content up on the channel. We've got quite a bit up there now. It's probably 9 or 10 videos. This might be the 10th. And so hopefully you find something that's been interesting, something you can like or share with somebody else. Consider subscribing to the channel, hit the notification bell, and feel free to put something in the comments. And again, PG show here. Try to keep it clean, play well with others. That stuff um, that I don't generally do well. So anyway, hope you have fun. Enjoy this, and we'll keep it going. Peace, everybody. Have fun. Our next video will be part 3 of the Stressors to Behavior Cycle series. That video will introduce the Stressors to Behavior cycle itself and get us ready to start working on developing a plan for change and growth. In the last video, we talked about what stress is, definition, working definition, and the one we're using is that stress is the response an organism has to external pressures and demands on it. Or we could also say stress is the reaction a living thing has to outside influences. In the previous video, we also described the way stress feels in terms of our physical body, our emotions, our thinking processes, and in setting our intention or will to take action or to behave in a particular way. Now we turn to the issue of assessing our individual stress, both the number and types of stresses we experience and the overall level of stress we're experiencing. And we'll use a low, moderate, high scale, 1 to 10, for assessing stress level. We'll be using several basic assessment methods to assess our stress. First is the symptoms of stress inventory. It's a variation on kind of a classic approach to assessment. And this takes a look at the symptoms of stress we might be experiencing and how often we experience them. The Perceived Stress Survey assesses various aspects of our mental emotional lives and how we perceive those situations over the past month. The Ardell Wellness Stress Test is a more comprehensive assessment of stress and stressors and offers guidance as to someone's ability to cope with current stressors or additional future stressors. And the 6 Dimensions of Wellness provides a framework for assessing stressors in the 6 main areas of overall health, including physical, emotional, intellectual or mental, social, occupational or work, and spiritual. Now, before we start, please recognize that these tools are basic assessment exercises and not for formal diagnosis of any condition or potential condition or illness. If you think at any time while you're doing this work that you might be experiencing higher levels of stress than you would like, or have a concern about any identified stressors, please contact your primary care physician to discuss that. And by all means, if you ever feel unsafe at any time, please call emergency services in your area at 911 for most folks. So we'll begin with the symptoms of stress inventory. And the top of that form starts with just this basic kind of instruction. symptoms of stress. How frequently do you find yourself experiencing such problems as headaches, problems going to sleep or staying asleep, unexplained muscle pain, jaw pain, uncontrolled anger, and frustration? And you see physical symptoms there, and probably a couple of emotional symptoms there, but that's not the whole list of them. So we'll get to that in a second. Now, across the top of the form, you see the frequency of symptoms row with categories from almost all day, every day on the left to never on the right. And the first four types of symptoms are included on this slide. You start with headaches, tense muscles, sore neck and back, fatigue, anxiety, worry, phobias, that sort of thing. And so basically, you're just going to put a check mark in the box that appropriately applies to you for that symptom. So, for example, if you have headaches 2 to 3 times a week, you just put a check mark in that column, that box, where you line up headaches with 2 to 3 times per week. It's straightforward. And this slide includes the next four categories of symptoms: difficulty falling asleep, irritability, insomnia, or staying asleep, bouts of anger and hostility. And again, you put a check mark in the appropriate box to identify which symptoms you experience and how often. So this slide here includes the next four categories of symptoms. And again, you check the appropriate box to describe your stress symptoms. These are boredom and depression, eating too much or too little, gastrointestinal type symptoms, and restlessness, itching, and tics. So when you finish with the inventory, you add the number of check marks in each of these columns. You see the one for high, a high category, or the high range, has 3 different columns, subcolumns. Moderate has 2 subcolumns, and low has 2 subcolumns. So basically, you go back up the form and total up all of the check marks you have for the 3 under the high category, and same with moderate and low. And I've done one of these using my own assessment for you to use as an example. So I had headaches once a week, tense muscles, sore neck and back, almost all day, every day. That's my life. Fatigue, just about every day. And anxiety or worry or phobias right now, a couple times, 3 times a week. Usually it's not that bad. It's usually not quite that much of an issue, but got a lot on the plate lately, so that's where we go. The difficulty falling asleep, just about every day. Irritability, at least once a week. It's probably more than that. Staying asleep every day. And again, bouts of anger and hostility. Real anger and hostility, maybe once a week. Maybe. I get perturbed, but irritable, I guess, would be the right word. So, yeah. And the last set, boredom, depression, a couple, 3 times a week. That's not my normal. Eating too much or too little, a couple, 3 times a week, and that goes either way. Gastrointestinal, that's a couple, 3 times a week. And restlessness, mostly there. So I'll put my numbers in the appropriate boxes. And so far, it looks like I had, on the first slide, I had 2 check marks in the high, 2 in the moderate, none in the low. The next slide I had, again, 2 in the high, 2 in the moderate, none in the low. So at that point, I had 4 in high, 4 in moderate, and none in the low range. And then for the third slide, third section, I had none in the high range, 4 in the moderate range, and none in the low range. So at that point, I had a total of 4 marks in the high range, 8 marks in the moderate range, and none in the low range. So 4 in the high, 8 in the moderate, none in the low. Now with heavy in the moderate, but a bunch in the high, a third of my responses were in the high, I would tend to call this a moderately high range. Next is the Perceived Stress Survey, or the PSS. And a description at the top of the assessment says a more precise measure of personal stress can be determined by using a variety of instruments that have been designed to help measure individual stress levels. First of these is called the Perceived Stress Scale, a classic stress assessment instrument originally developed in 1983. Remains a popular choice, helping us understand how different situations affect our feelings and our perceived stress. The questions in the scale ask about your feelings and thoughts during the last month. In each case, you will be asked to indicate how often you felt or thought a certain way. And the scale is a little interesting. So, although some of the questions are similar, there are differences between them, and you should treat each one as a separate question. The best approach is to answer fairly quickly. That is, don't try to count up the number of times you felt a particular way. Rather, indicate the alternative that seems like a reasonable estimate. So here's a scale. 0 is never, 1 is almost never, 2 is sometimes, 3 is fairly often, and 4 is very often. Okay, so that's over the last month, and it says that in every question. First one about, have you been upset, felt unable to control things, nervous and stressed, confident, things are going your way. And the next set, how often have you found you couldn't cope with things, been able to control irritations, felt you're on top of things, been angered because stuff is outside of your control, and felt things were piling up on you. So the PSS has a twist on the scoring. After you get done answering the questions, when you go to tabulate the score, you have to reverse the scores for questions 4, 5, 7, and 8. And so if you put a 0 in there for never, you would reverse that to 4. If you put a 1, it would turn to a 3, a 2 stays a 2, 3 goes to 1, 4 goes to 0. So my score on the first 5 was an 11. And that's after changing the 3 to a 1. Otherwise, it would have been 13. And the second 5, I think I had the same exact thing. 11. So my total score was a 22, which would put me in the moderate range for stress. Next, we have the Ardell Wellness Stress Test. Of the first 3 assessment tools, the Ardell is the most revealing in terms of stress assessment. It has 25 questions, and the scoring system is a bit more complex, with the number of answers having both positive and negative values. Don't worry, it's not that hard to work with. And if you look at the bottom of this, The scale goes from a +3, which is ecstatic. So Mike Tyson word, love it, ecstatic, all the way over to -3, which is completely dismayed. I have a different word for that, but we'll go with completely dismayed. And you have various levels of happiness, disappointment, and indifference in there as well. So the first half of the questions are included on this slide. You'll notice the Ardell asks about several different aspects of overall health and life experience, including physical, emotional, intellectual, mental, social, occupational, and spiritual. And this dovetails into the last assessment tool we use, which is the 6 dimensions of wellness framework. And we'll do the same thing for the last half of the questions, and we'll total up our numbers. And the easiest way to kind of figure your total is to count up all your positive numbers, then add up all your negative numbers. If your positive numbers are more than your negative numbers, subtract the negatives from the positives, and that's your score. If your negative numbers are more than your positives, subtract the positives total from the negatives total, and that's your score, only it's a negative number. And we'll go through that. And there's the scale. And remember, this is not a diagnosis of any condition. It's just a scale. So you take your total number and find it on the scale on this slide, and you'd read the description for that range. And as with most measurement tools, the higher the total number on your scale, the more likely you are to be in a good position, and in this case would be to manage your stress level and your particular stressors. On the next couple slides, you can see how my self-assessment went. And again, these numbers totally different from the last time I took this thing, which was way back when I was doing substance abuse counseling for other folks, and I would take these things on occasion just to see where I was at, and a whole lot different than the scores I got this time. So for this first half, total it up, and my total was a -8. So I had 6 for positive numbers and -14 for negatives. So the 14 minus 6 is 8, but the 8 is negative. And for the second half, my total was a +2. And I had a +8 for positive numbers and a -6 for negative numbers. So the 8 minus 6 is 2, and the 2 is positive. And I combine the +2 and the -8 on the first half, and I've got a -6 overall score. So my total of -6 is in the 0 to -24 range. Anything between -24 and +24 is in the moderate stress range. 25 to 75 is in the low, 25 negative to 75 negative is in the high. And so the moderate range is 48 points wide, so moderately high would fall in the higher third of the range from about -6 to -24. My -6 score is at the low end of the moderately high range. Now, the last time I took this, about 5 years ago, and my numbers were between 25 and 50. I think it was 26 or 27, something like that. How the mighty have fallen. So my assessment scores fall into the moderately high range overall and are of some concern. And those concerns have been communicated to my physician, and we're working to address those. And remember, these tools are for self-assessment, not for diagnosing any condition or illness. And again, if your self-assessment is of concern to you, please communicate those concerns to your doctor as soon as possible. And these would be the scores: moderately high, moderate, moderately high. So I'm going to guess I'm in the moderately high stress range. Go figure. So as we noted in the prior video, stressors are simply anything that causes a stress response or reaction in an organism. And also, as we noted in the earlier video, there are various types of stressors that can be identified as causing us stress, or distress, which is straight up strain, pain, and suffering. And these stressor types are problems, pressures, demands, threats, and traumas. Now, through self-assessment and intentional planning, we can figure out how to prioritize our needs for change and where to use our energies to make life changes in each area of overall wellness. The last tool we'll use in our self-assessment of overall stress and stressors analysis is that 6 dimensions of wellness. This tool has been around for half a century, and we can use the 6 dimensions of wellness framework to identify and categorize our stressors. So these 6 areas under the 6 dimensions of wellness that we're going to look at, try to find any stressors in those areas. We have the physical, intellectual, emotional, social, occupational, and spiritual. And they have definitions for each one of these. Intellectual and emotional, sometimes people get those confused, but if you kind of get a feel for what they're talking about in each one, it's easier, and you can use these always as a guide. And we can use this framework to identify and categorize our own stressors by aspect of wellness. So physical would be, aspects of health related to the body. Intellectual is about our thinking, judgment, decision making. Emotional, about our emotions or feelings. Social, how we relate to other people or groups of people. Occupational, related to job, work, career choices. And spiritual, having to do with our perception, at least, of our connection with ourselves, other people, other beings, the environment, and spirit itself. So we can use the 6 dimensions of wellness framework to identify and categorize our own stressors, each one of these 6 different dimensions. So to use the 6 dimensions of wellness for stressors analysis, we can use the format on the next few slides. We'll put a check mark in the column that represents our level of stress for each aspect of wellness. 1 is the lowest level of stress we can choose, and 10 is the highest. If my level of physical health stress is at a 5, say, I'll put a check mark in the 5 column to the right of physical health, and so on. And there's a descriptor page for each of these aspects in the next couple of slides as well. So again, physical health, bones, organs, muscles, nutrition, environmental conditions, your safety, and intellectual thinking. We talked about that before. Emotional is about your feelings. And the last 3 aspects of health that the 6 dimensions will help us assess: social health, occupational, and spiritual. Get this done. And the last 3, again, social health, relationships, group activity, a sense of belonging or affiliation. It's a basic need. Occupational health, related to your work, your job, your career. And spiritual health, about your connections to self, to other people, life in general. your sense of being free to live as you want, within reason, of course, and living to your potential, or as Maslow would put it, being self-actualized. So we'll total up the number values for our check marks and determine the level of stress we're experiencing in general. It's just an estimate. We divide that total number by 6 for the different aspects of overall wellness to get a numerical value for the stress range. And this scale 1 through 3 is low, 4 to 7 moderate, 8 to 10 is in the high range, and I generally would go 3 through 5 would be moderately low, and say 7 through 9 would be moderately high. So using my list of stressors, get quite a few different things here, quite a few in each category, and as indicated by the arrows, these are all stressors that were on the increase for me, especially over the last year and a half. Mostly the physical pain type issues are most pressing. We'll get through the other stuff, but the physical stuff is the limiting aspect of health right now, for the most part. So for these first 3 aspects, I'd take an estimate for my physical health. I checked off a 9. It could be a 10, who knows, but it's at least a 9. Intellectual health, about a 5, doing pretty good there. And emotional health, there's still some stuff that we got to get through. That's kind of down the road, probably. We'll deal with the more heady stuff to begin with, like trying to get a diagnosis for what's going on. Social health, again, very high stress level there. I'm pretty much a social person, and this isolation's not doing it. Occupational health, that's a stress. It relates to all kinds of things. All your other choices about how you live, your finances, where you live, what you can afford for a place to live, that sort of stuff. So, and spiritual health, about a 6, probably a little less than that. I'm doing a lot better there, and it's probably what's keeping me in one piece. So when I total up my numbers, I get 47, and I divide that by 6, I get 7.8 for an average overall wellness stress level. And so for me, that puts me in the moderately high range, I believe. I said 7 to 9, so moderately high. So when I organize all the scores, I'm in the moderately high range 3 out of the 4, and moderate. So overall, moderately high. If I had to put a number value on it, probably be about overall, about a 7.5 out of 10, which is a lot, pretty high. Yeah, and it's been a concern. My historical levels are usually a lot less. And so I have been in touch with my doctors, working with them to try to figure out what's been going on and how we can address it and maybe prevent similar kind of episode from occurring down the road. It's kind of hit out of the blue, and I'd like to be a little more prepared if it happens again. So this video was a bit thick, I know that, but it's a good start toward getting an understanding of our stress levels and the stresses we're experiencing in our lives. And so to review, we talked about stress, what it is, how we assess it, the 4 different methods that we used, the different types of stressors, what are they, what types, and talked about self-analysis for those stressors. We were able to categorize those. And we also been able to come up with a average score for our stress level. It fits in a particular range through that self-assessment process. And I think it might be eye-opening for some folks. I want to thank you for visiting and watching this video through to the end. It's pretty long, but next up will be the next part of the stressors to behavior cycle. We'll start talking about the different phases. There are 9 of them. Easy, 9 principles, 9 phases. Stressors, feelings, and thoughts are the first 3, and that's what that video will focus on. Find anything interesting or valuable in this video, please consider hitting the like button, or subscribing to the channel, signing up for notifications. You might be the first subscriber we have. Who knows? I don't think I got. Well, it doesn't show anybody. I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but you might be the first. And again, hit the notification bell if you subscribe, and share this video with people who are like-minded. And if you want to, put something in the comment section and keep it, PG-13. Thanks. Also want to take a second to send best wishes to Danny Bonaducci. Actually, used to watch the Partridge Family every week, prime time. And he and I are about the same age and have kind of had similar experience over the last year or so with an illness or illnesses that we can't quite get a handle on. So, feel your pain, brother, and wish you the best. And for those of you who've watched the other 9Ps videos, I've memorialized some of the folks I've lost in the last couple of years who meant a lot to me, and I thank God that we don't have anybody for this video. Let's keep that going. Anyway, till next time, peace everyone. Wish you all the best.